What is going on, everyone? In today's episode, I'm going to share with you some pro grow tips that I've learned over the years to growing the best, most productive, and healthiest grapes possible. Let's go. The first tip to growing the best grapes ever has to do with soil coverage. You absolutely have to mulch your plants because otherwise they're going to suffer. We've mulched our plants here with about 6 inches of deep hardwood mulch. This is nice, rich hardwood mulch. It's going to break down. It's going to add organic material, help to feed the plants, soften the soil, just help to amend the soil overall, help with plant development and soil nutrition, but it's also going to do the main job of suppressing weeds. Grapes do not do a great job of competing against weeds. Grapes are very prone, especially more domesticated, less wild grapes. Your more table fare grapes or some of your wine grapes are not going to fare very well against weeds. They're more disease prone, they're more pest prone than some of your more wild cultivars of grapes. Because of that, we want to keep weed pressure down because those weeds actually invite in disease. They reduce airflow. They're going to compete for water and nutrients in the soil, and you're going to find that your grapes are overall going to suffer. The second tip to growing the biggest, healthiest grapes possible is nitrogen. When it comes to fertilizer, nitrogen is the main focus. Now, you cannot ignore phosphorus, potassium, trace minerals. You cannot ignore those, otherwise your plants are certainly going to suffer. But nitrogen specifically is something that we focus on because nitrogen is responsible for new leaves and new growth. And since you're growing a vine that is primarily new growth and new leaves, and grapes grow very fast, nitrogen is a main focus for us. Now, we use Trifecta Plus. That's the fertilizer that we use. That's the fertilizer that we would recommend you to use. Obviously, we do carry it over at MIgardener.com, but any fertilizer that has nitrogen is going to be great. We just use Trifecta because it lasts all season long. We used a 1/4 cup when we planted these plants here on the farm, and we're going to be using a 1/4 cup at the end of the season since they're a perennial to just get them ready for winter. But any fertilizer that you feel comfortable with, that you've got on hand, as long as it's got a lot of nitrogen, should work just fine. Blood meal, fish emulsion, or any just all-purpose fertilizer that's got a good first number. The 3 numbers on the bag: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. We'll focus on a high first number, and that's going to be great for your grapes. The next critical component to growing grapes well has to do with your trellising method. Now, it doesn't really matter what type of trellising method you choose. However, you need to get them off the ground. Grapes will not perform well on the ground whatsoever. Disease and pests, mice and aphids, and just every bug in the world will come after a grape. Grapes, as you grow them, you'll know, we'll talk more about pest control in a second, but they are so pest prone. You got to get them off the ground. That increases airflow and reduces the ability for pests to find the fruit and as well as the foliage and snack on them. So we've constructed here a pretty simple grape trellis. We'll go through some of the components. You can make it yourself. It's very cheap to do, and it's very quick to do, in fact, as well. But this is what you'd use if you're growing them commercially. This is just a small scale, scaled down version of what is used commercially to grow grapes. And you could use a chain link fence. Chain link fence works great, just as a nice divider wall. Privacy fence, cattle panel trellising also works. Really doesn't matter. You just want to get them off the ground. That's so important. The next thing that I really like about a trellis like this is because it actually allows us to get the proper spacing. One thing with cattle panel trellising or privacy fence or your chain link fence, those fencing methods, they're intended to be a fence, not a trellis. And so this trellis here actually guides us to have the right spacing between the runs. We'll talk about that in a second. It's so important that you have your runs spaced out far enough to allow for good airflow and good fruit production. These runs are spaced about 1.5 feet apart. And that means we have a wire here. This is 14 gauge metal wire. And we have each run about 1.5 feet apart. And so we have 4 runs on this trellis on about a 6 foot tall post. These were 9 feet tall originally. We buried them 3 feet in the ground to get them nice and secure so they're not going anywhere. And then we ran our wires. The wires allow us to basically hold our plants up, and the runs will go horizontally along the wire. Now, the reason why we went with 14 gauge is because it's strong. You really want to go with a nice strong wire, and the lower you go, the stiffer the wire is going to be. I would never go any less than about 16 or 17 gauge on the wire, because as the plants get heavier, that weight is really going to burden down these wires, and they're going to be under pressure. They have a higher chance of snapping, and then you lose your whole plant, and that's just a big mess. So I went with 14 gauge wire. I felt like that was totally sufficient. And a lot of the farmers I've spoken with over the years, they use 14 gauge as well. 13 gauge is pretty common, but you can get this 14 gauge at Tractor Supply. It's pretty inexpensive to get. And that's what we chose for our wires to hold the plants up. And then lastly are the posts. I kind of mentioned they were 6 feet tall. You can go taller, absolutely. It just makes managing a little more challenging. So you could do another 8 foot or so tall trellis if you wanted. These are about 6 feet tall, like I said. 9 feet, 3 feet in the ground, 6 feet above, 1.5 feet on each run. And then you'll notice there's one thing that we did differently this year with our trellis here, and that's after speaking actually with a guy named Luigi. It's a very generic Italian name, but Luigi, he actually grows grapes, and he actually follows our channel. And he saw that our grape trellis at the shop did not have what's called an angular brace. And he highly recommended that we grow with an angular brace, because he said that on their vineyard, they grow on 30 acres there in Italy. They're just outside of Florence. And he said that angular braces are becoming very commonplace with vineyards. And they actually started using them to grow hops, believe it or not. Hop growers would grow with angular braces, and it holds the weight much better and provides much more support for your vines. And so if you're going to construct a trellis like this, I highly recommend using angular braces, and I'll show you what that is right now. This is an angle brace. So basically, as the name would imply, it's just on an angle. We took this same post, buried it in the ground at about like a 60-degree angle or so-ish. Luigi basically just told us that we just need to have it on some form of angle, which helps better hold the weight of the grapes as the vines grow. And so we put it on about a 60-degree angle-ish. And it's just, like I said, we didn't measure it, but it's at a noticeable angle. And this just helps as the grapes get heavy in the center. It helps because there's more pressure that the posts can hold. And these are just regular cedar posts. They're just 5-inch cedar posts, fence posts. You can get them just about anywhere. But yeah, really simple, very, very simple construction. The posts, they cost us, I think, like $8 a post. And then the wire, to get all the wire, I think was about $30. So to do all of these, it was maybe $200 to do this whole trellis, all 3 of these runs. And this will grow a crazy amount of grapes. Speaking of growing a crazy amount of grapes, that brings me to my next tip to growing a ton of grapes, and that's how many plants you can fit in an area. So these are 50 feet long, these runs, and we have 4 plants per run. And that gives us right around about 12.5 feet per plant, give or take. And that's great spacing, because the thing is, you can put them, some vineyards will plant their grapes 6 to 8 feet apart. For me, that is way too close. It comes down to maintenance. They are out there all the time pruning. And if you're out there all the time pruning, keeping them very aggressively pruned back, by all means, plant a few more plants, you'll grow even more grapes. I just know that with my limited time and the fact that I don't want to be constantly managing these, I space them out about 12.5 feet apart, and that allows them to sprawl a little bit more without being too congested and clogging up that airflow, leading to disease. So I've got 4 plants in this 50-foot run right here, but you can, like I said, you could plant them a little closer together. You just have to prune them a tiny bit more. Our rows are spaced out about 8 feet apart, and that way we have about 2 feet of mulch on either side, giving us about a 6-foot path in between. The plants are 8 feet. The pathway is about 6.5 feet, allowing us to be able to bring a mower through here. Just that way, again, it makes management so much simpler. If they were too close, we'd have to use like a push mower or something like that. This, we could just take our riding mower through here, do 2 passes, and it's cut and it's good. You really want to, if you're growing a lot of them, you want to have good spacing, because they do take a lot of management. They grow really fast. You do want to keep weeds down, you want to keep grass down, and so managing in between the rows is also important as well. But that's spacing. And the next thing I want to talk about are pests and disease, because those are the 2 things that if you're growing grapes, you're absolutely going to encounter. When it comes to pests and disease, we use 3 sprays. Now these sprays are all organic and they are very safe to use in an organic setting, and they're also really easy to find and pretty inexpensive. And you can find them as a home gardener, you can find them in a concentrate just about any hardware store or garden supply center. But the first thing we use is our all-purpose insecticide. Now this is Captain Jack's Dead Bug. Not a sponsor, this is spinosad. You can find other brands of spinosad as well. But spinosad, it basically works on just about every bug. And what it does essentially, just when it's consumed, when the pests consume the plant material, essentially that gets into their gut, and the gut bacteria basically break them down from the inside out.
Death to all of them.
So we've got, like, there's so many bugs. There's from Japanese beetles to spider mites to aphids, codling moths, leaf miners. The list goes on and on and on for pests that attack your grapes. And spinosad works awesome for that. So again, we just use Captain Jack's Dead Bug. We use it about every 3 weeks. If it rains, we'll reapply, but it's really great stuff. During the off season, for like thrips or scale, stuff that can overwinter on your plant, we use this Monterey's horticultural oil. We'll spray down when the plant is dormant. This is during the winter, like late February, early March. We'll come through. It has to be above freezing to spray this. So we prefer above 35 degrees. We'll pick a nice warm winter day to spray some horticultural oil. Any horticultural oil will work. I tend to stick away from neem oil. Neem oil is okay, but it can sometimes tend to be a little bit harsh on plants. Horticultural grade oils are a little more refined, and they work very well. They're very reliable and very dependable. This just kind of smothers out any insect eggs or things that are overwintering on your plants. So we use that for the insects. And then for for disease, we would use something like copper fungicide. Copper fungicide is so important. And the reason why we don't have any leaf spot, any powdery mildew, any leaf curl, anything like that, is because we actually use copper fungicide in the early spring. Copper fungicide should be used as a preventative, not as a cure. Copper fungicide is great and it can cure. The thing is though, with grapes, because they're so disease prone, you want to prevent before you have to control. That's kind of the secret to growing really great grapes, is you want to stay on top of it before it becomes a problem. Because once it is a problem, it really will set your plants back a great amount. So we went in the early spring before they really started growing crazy and before it got nice and hot, we sprayed down with copper fungicide. And that basically just covers the leaf. It kills off any spores. It really helps to kind of just create a leaf surface that is inhospitable to fungi, bad fungi, powdery mildew, blights from colonizing the leaf surface and then spreading from there. And also is really integral in the early season when it's cold and wet, and those type of issues can kind of be exacerbated by the cold, wet conditions. But that is really all we use, those 3 sprays. They're organic, they're super reliable, and I've found over the years, for a home gardener, there's really nothing better. Next tip I've got for you is to not allow too much growth. Now we talk about how grapes grow really fast. They produce a ton of growth, but it's so important that we allow only the right type of growth that we're looking for. This is called training. We want to train our vines so that we have the best shape overall. And because grapes grow really fast, it makes training really simple. What you simply want to do is you want about 1 run per year. You don't want to fill up a whole trellis right off the bat. Not that that would even happen, but you don't want to fill up a trellis in 1 or 2 years. It's just not practical. The best thing to do is to fill up a single run and train just that year on that 1 run. Then the next year, as it starts to produce some more growth, train up to the 2nd run and really only allow from the main stalk, try to only allow 1 branch to grow in one direction and 1 branch to grow in the other direction. That means that this plant right here, I'm going to allow 1 branch to form, one side of the plant, if you will, to grow this way. And then I'm going to have another branch growing off in this direction. And that way it's simply spreading out on this wire, and it's not getting over clustered. If you have 3, 4, 5 different branches coming off of your grapevine, you're going to find that airflow is going to be very clustered. It's going to be very challenging to control that growth, and it's overall just going to be a little bit messy. So keeping it controlled is super important. And then the final thing is watering and pH. Now, the great thing with pH is that based on your soil pH, it will change the flavor of the grapes. That is what so many people love about viticulture. Viticulture is the growing of grapes, and they're so versatile. Different wines and different grapes grown in different regions will have different flavors. And that's awesome because it allows you to really kind of grow in any type of soil. You can grow in soil that's slightly alkaline, you can grow in soil that's slightly acidic, and depending on the mineralization and the soil makeup, it's going to change how those grapes taste. And that's fantastic because it's not like other crops where, like blueberries, for instance, need such a specific pH to do well that if you don't have that, it takes a lot of work. These are very flexible for a variety of different soils. And then the last thing is water. Watering could not be more important to growing great grapes. If you do not have good watering and good watering practices, your grapes are going to suffer. Grapes are about 97% water. That means that all that water is going into forming grapes. And if you don't want to grow raisins, you need to water more frequently. Now, the less you water, the sweeter the grapes are going to be, but the smaller and less there will be. So there's kind of a fine balance. Too much water is not a great thing, but not enough water is also not a great thing. And I typically find that based on where you live, your mulching style, our mulch is going to help hold water in the soil. So we're going to water far less than if you had no mulch at all, or the soil type. If your soil is more sandy versus more clay, it's really going to vary. So I can't tell you how much you should be watering, but just a general rule of thumb is about 1 inch of water per week is appropriate for growing grapes. And how you measure 1 inch of water is if you were to take a square, about a 12-inch by 12-inch square that's 1 inch high, like a little frame, a little picture frame, and imagine filling that up with water. That's how much water you would need to water your grapes once per week. That's how much water they need to do well, to perform well, to produce grapes that are going to be acceptable for anyone that's ever going to try them. They're going to have great flavor, great texture, great crunch, and you're really going to ensure that the plants are going to be not stressed and produce well. And those are all the pro grow tips that I've gained over the years. I've talked to dozens and dozens of grape farmers on how to grow the best grapes, and I'm really excited about this because this is just the beginning of our grape patch. But at the end of the day, how you grow is up to you. There's a lot of versatility, and you can grow grapes in a variety of different ways. You don't have to grow in this style, but we're really excited about this, and I hope you guys are as well. So if you did enjoy, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, so you can watch this vineyard grow and mature. And if you have any other questions, post them down in the comments box down below. I'll try to answer them. And I also want to thank all the people that I've spoken with over the years that have helped me to produce this content, to bring this information out to you. I wasn't born with it, so that says something. So all the people that have helped me, thank you so very much. And I hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully y'all learned something new. And this is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you to grow bigger. Take care. Bye. Hey, thank you so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, consider clicking this one. You'll probably enjoy it just as much. I want to thank you for your viewership because without it, this channel would not be as amazing as it is. Also, if you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing. It's free, and we upload videos every Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. We also have vegetable seeds, fertilizer, or tools. If you need any of those, consider visiting MIgardener.com. Links will be in the description box below. We've got you covered. And as always, we'll see you all in the garden. Take care. Bye.